I walk into the Wave Waterpark Vista with a glossy brochure in my hand and a heart full of hope, as any child of privilege does when a summer promise is made. The sun glints on the plastic slides, the sign smiles at me, and I imagine a day of effortless joy. Yet what greets my eyes is a scene that feels like a poorly rehearsed tragedy. First I see the tower of slides, once proud and tall, now standing half-hearted with 3 of its 4 tubes shuttered. The flow rider that once promised a surf like Rush is dark and silent. The lazy river that should wind like a gentle stream is reduced to a cramped trench where water swirls in a murky swirl. Why is this a disaster? A ride that is closed robs families of the experience they paid for. It turns anticipation into disappointment, and the empty brackets of the attractions become a reminder that the park cares more about saving money than honoring guests. The management must have cut staff and maintenance because the pattern repeats each summer, a schedule of repair that never finishes. The result is a cascade of unfulfilled promises that erodes trust. I step toward the cabana, my birthday party for a dear cousin scheduled at 1:00. The staff nod politely, then whisper that the food will be ready at 1:30. I watch the clock creep to 1:45, and still there is no tray, no scent of warm pizza, no cheerful clatter of plates. The kitchen staff, apparently invisible, are too slow or too careless, and they even give away the appetizers meant for us to strangers at the counter. This is not a simple delay, it is a breach of contract. Food that arrives cold and soggy like a limp towel shatters the joyous atmosphere. The children stare, stomachs rumbling, while the adults feel a surge of embarrassment. When a service promises a time, it creates an expectation. Breaking that expectation feels like a personal slight, especially when the staff pretend we agreed to a later hour. The deception signals a lack of professionalism and a culture that values profit over hospitality. I wander to the wave pool, hoping the water will cleanse the sour taste of the cabana mishap. The pool water is a dull gray, the smell of chlorine heavy and stale. I watch a child dip his hand and pull it out with a grimace. Murky water suggests poor filtration, which means bacteria may linger, posing health risks. When a water park fails to maintain clear, clean water, it betrays the most basic duty to protect its visitors, turning a place of fun into a potential hazard. The lines stretch beyond sight, a sea of families pressed together like sardines. I stand in a queue that moves slower than a snail, watching lifeguards chat beside each other, their eyes not on the water but on their phones. I notice a near miss where a teenager slips toward a shallow edge, only saved by a reflexive shout. Inattentive lifeguards are a lethal oversight. Their primary role is to watch, to intervene, to give families peace of mind. When they fail, the fear of injury permeates the air, and the joy of sliding down a tube is replaced by a nervous glance at the adult on duty. The food stalls offer a hot dog that arrives cold, the bun damp, the sausage tasting of cardboard. The price is $15, a sum that feels like a theft when the product is substandard. Overpriced, low-quality food erodes the value equation. Guests pay for a premium experience, not for a cheap, unsatisfying bite. This also reflects a broader pattern of greedy pricing without regard for quality. I examine the locker area, where the wooden lockers creak and some doors no longer latch. A child's treasured swimsuit falls onto the floor, a small loss that feels like a betrayal of safety. Faulty lockers indicate negligent upkeep, forcing families to worry about lost belongings, adding another layer of stress to a day meant for leisure. I notice a sign announcing a spectator fee of $20 for adults who simply watch their grandchildren. The fee.
E feels like a tax on love, demanding payment for the simple pleasure of being present. It alienates parents, turning what should be a family bonding moment into a financial transaction, and it drives a wedge between the park and its most loyal patrons. When I approach the Wave Camp program, I encounter a chaotic crowd of children running unchecked. The staff appear overwhelmed.
Hello, traveler, I am here to tell you how the businesses near the Wave Waterpark in Vista tend to behave, and what you might expect when you step out of the splash zone. First, let's set the stage. The whole area around the water park feels a little worn down, and the energy often leans toward the negative. The common thread is that many places struggle with poor service, confusing policies, and a sense that the staff are either overstretched or simply not caring. That atmosphere can turn a fun day into a series of little disappointments. Now let's walk through the specific spots that most visitors bump into. Vista Village as a whole feels more like a crowded parking lot than a welcoming hub. People report that the parking areas have become a gathering place for drug use, public drinking, and even makeshift camps for the homeless. The sense of safety fades after dark, and the lack of active security makes the whole complex feel neglected. The restaurants that used to shine now sit behind long lines and overpriced menus that leave a sour taste. One visitor described a pizza that cost $33 but tasted no better than a cheap frozen option. The same sentiment echoes in the nearby fast food joint where spaghetti and chicken fingers were called outright garbage. Even the large wholesale store suffers from rude cashiers and aggressive cart attendants, turning a simple grocery run into a stressful ordeal. Spa Botanica tries to promise relaxation, but the reality is a tangled web of unresponsive phones and inflexible cancellation rules. Guests who fell ill or needed to change appointments often found themselves trapped by a policy that charges the full price without a word of empathy. The front desk is repeatedly mentioned as rude, unorganized, and even dismissive, making the whole spa experience feel more like a headache than a holiday. One guest described waiting for a manager that never arrived and being left to stare at a receipt for a service they never received. The overall picture is a place where the massage tables are fine, but the people behind the desk ruin the peace. 508 Tavern presents itself as a laid-back spot for drinks, but the vibe is marred by loud outdoor music that spills into the neighborhood and a cramped seating area with hard, backless chairs. The menu leans heavily on small plates and expensive tacos that leave diners wondering if they are paying for food or for the view of the parking lot. Service can be spotty, with orders disappearing and long waits for simple dishes, turning a casual drink into a test of patience. The Yellow Deli Vista, LLC tries to offer quick sandwiches, but the service feels like a game of hide and seek. Hosts are described as ignoring guests for minutes while other parties are served first, and orders sometimes sit untouched for an hour. One story even mentions a server asking an odd personal question that left diners unsettled. Even when the food arrives, it is sometimes found with hair or served cold, and complaints about the lack of a proper menu for older guests go unanswered. The overall feeling is that the restaurant is more interested in looking busy than in actually feeding people. Belching Beaver Brewery Tavern and Grill aims for a craft beer vibe, but the reality is a mix of sloppy food and chaotic service. Desserts such as creme brulee have been reported as curdled and far from the glossy picture on the website. Credit card issues were met with disbelief rather than assistance, and a birthday celebration for the owners turned the dining room into a noisy playground that made other guests uncomfortable. Staff sometimes forget basic items like silverware or tell patrons they must order food before they can pay for drinks, creating a confusing and frustrating dining experience. The small banking outlet on Bankers Hill suffers from a lack of clear customer service. Patrons note that the staff do not engage helpfully and that even basic inquiries are met with vague responses.
While the details are few, the impression is a place where the personal touch is missing and the transaction feels impersonal. Collab Public House tries to blend several breweries under one roof, but the space feels crowded with families and noisy parties. Children running around make it hard for anyone seeking a quiet drink, and the wine and beer selections are described as overpriced for the quality offered. The food options are limited, and the overall setting feels more like a crowded cafeteria than a relaxed pub. In summary, the businesses around the Wave Waterpark tend to share a pattern of inattentive staff, confusing policies, and an overall sense that the customer is an afterthought. Prices often feel higher than the experience delivered, and the lack of consistent security or cleanliness adds an undercurrent of unease. If you are planning a visit, keep these points in mind. Consider arriving early to avoid parking chaos, bring a backup plan for meals in case a restaurant stalls, and be ready to ask for clarification on cancellation rules before you book a spa treatment. It may be wise to carry cash for places that seem to have payment hiccups and to pick establishments that have a reputation for consistent service rather than flashy decor. Travelers who stay alert and...
So I was looking into crimes near the Wave Waterpark Vista, to see what's going on around that area. And oh my goodness, I found some pretty shady stuff. Businesses near the Wave Waterpark Vista are super tricky. They'll try to scam you out of your money in the most ridiculous ways. I found this one story where people were approached in parking lots, usually near stores, and they were offered gold jewelry or coins at super discounted prices. But it's all fake. The scammers would tell these sob stories about needing emergency cash, and people would fall for it. They de-hand over hundreds or thousands of dollars, only to find out the items were worthless. I am what's wrong with these people? Can't they see it as a scam? But I guess when you ray on vacation, you ray more trusting, you know. You ray in a new place, and you ray not as aware of your surroundings. And these scammers, they ray like experts at playing on people's emotions. My prediction is that the victims were left feeling super embarrassed and frustrated, you know. They probably couldn't believe they fell for it. And like who knows what happened to the scammers. Maybe they got away with it, or maybe they got caught. But either way, it's just so wrong. And then I found another story where scammers would work in groups, targeting people who looked distracted, like families with kids or elderly shoppers. They used these convincing stories, like they needed to sell gold to pay for a family emergency, and people would buy into it. But it's all a lie, you know. The scammers would even physically